Lisa Rubin is MSNBC legal correspondent and has been watching the trial unfold from inside the courthouse. Catherine Christian spent over 30 years as a prosecutor in that office, Manhattan District Attorney's Office, and they'll join me now. Great to have you here. Can we start with the moment that with the juror and the Trump saying something in the words of Judge Marchand, 12 feet of the juror in the response? Just take me through that.
So Judge Marchand, after that juror left the stand, essentially, she was being questioned. After she left, and Judge Marchand decided he was not going to excuse her for cause, he said, I have something that I want to put on the record. And that's when he said, Mr. Blanche, your client, while this prospective juror was sitting no more than 12 feet away from him, was audibly saying something and looking in her direction. I couldn't quite make out what it was. This is Marchand saying this. I couldn't quite make out what it was. But I want you to understand that witness intimidation will not be tolerated in my courtroom. Have a talk with your client.
Again, I'm going to do my check-in that I always do, Catherine, with you, who practiced for 30 years in that office. Like, a common thing in voir dire to have the defendant, like, audibly saying things to the jurors?
No, only and I'm not making light of this, only the mentally unwell ones. That's the only time you see criminal defendants acting out, literally.
In that kind of situation.
And then it's sort of, you understand it.
Right. It's someone who for some deep psychological medical reason, literally can't control themselves.
Exactly.
And that's really the only case.
That's the only time you ever see that.
I will say that having watched both E. Jean Carroll trials, the first of which Donald Trump did not attend, the second of which he did attend, there were some episodes that were reminiscent of what happened today. I don't recall them happening during jury selection themselves, but there were times when lawyers were speaking in the courtroom and he disagreed vociferously with what they were saying. And for demonstrative effect, Donald Trump pounded the table or shook his head or crossed his arms to indicate his vigorous disagreement with what was being said. And we all know how that story ended. None of the jurors were positively impacted by that performance. In fact, there were jurors in that case who I thought were not at all partial to E. Jean Carroll, who looked the other way when her lawyer, Robbie Kaplan, was closing. I really thought that something might happen that we weren't expecting, and yet, unanimously, they found for her. So that's a long way of saying you can't always read into prospective jurors or jurors' behavior just based on what a defendant does in the courtroom.
So I want to start with where we are and then work backwards to how we got here. So as of today, we've got 7 jurors sworn in. Now, again, this is not my thing.
It's remarkable.
It seems to me so fast.
Yeah, Judge Marchand is known as a fair and efficient judge. This is remarkable because this type of defendant, meaning very high profile, that people have strong opinions, this is very remarkable that he was able to, Judge Marchand, get 7 jurors, which means he only needs 5 more for the 12 and an additional 6 for the alternates. He also worked overtime today, Judge Marchand. Courts closed at 4:30. He worked to 5:30. So it shows that we're going to do this by Thursday. And he probably will, unless something happens and, things happen. But I think there will be a complete jury by the end of the day on Thursday.
Now, just to benchmark this, we had a former New York judge sitting in that chair, Judge Kiesel, on Thursday, I believe. And she was looking at this saying, like, I don't know, man, this could be a few weeks.
And you know what? She's a friend of mine. Yeah. There's only one other judge in that courthouse who would get a jury as fast as this judge. Judge Pickles, hello. So he has done a remarkable job, Judge Marchand.
Okay, so the process today, so we already got the 50 who said, I can't.
Correct.
It's Donald Trump, forget it. I think is probably the subtext.
And even some more, right? Because there were not people who took themselves out off the top, but came back. And when they were ready to take the jury questionnaire, basically said, I thought about it overnight. I can't do it.
So that's two cuts, right? So you got the I can't do it, then I thought about it for a night, I can't do it. Then you got the people who are like, I can do it. And then you've got this, to me, slightly comical spectacle of Trump's lawyers and legal team furiously checking out the social media profile of these people. And in a number of cases finding, someone posted an AI video of Trump saying, I'm a dumb F word. Someone else on the day that I think the election was declared on Facebook being like, honk that horn, baby. Lots of memes about Trump being a buffoon or bad or dumb being read into court from the record of the prospective jurors. What was that like?
It was fascinating because on some level, some of them you could see really were legitimately struck for cause. So I'll give you an example. There was someone who, relevant to the events at issue here, had posted something on Facebook saying, get him out and lock him up.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? That person can't stay.
I think we are all agreed.
Correct.
Nope, can't be on the jury.
Okay, and the person with the AI video was the other person to go. But let's talk about the woman with the horn. That woman, when she was brought in for questioning, said, well, let me put it into some context for you. I took that video watching what was happening in my neighborhood because election night felt historic to me, and it was also evocative of the nightly 7 o'clock cheer that we did in New York for emergency workers and healthcare workers during that period of time in 2020. And I wanted to remember it.
Document it. Yeah.
Correct. And she said, I documented it. You know, sitting here today, do I believe that I can be fair? Unequivocally, yes. And Rashawn said, look, I have the power under our case law to take her at her word, and I'm going to. She was struck with a peremptory challenge, but not for cause.
Right. Peremptory means, again, just to remind you, they each get 10?
10.
Where you could just strike people for any reason.
And if Trump is convicted, they will appeal on that they were denied that cause and had to use their peremptory challenge. They will lose that because Judge Merchan, as Lisa said, struck other people and didn't even wait for cause. It just says, you're gone. And also struck people who self-identified that they couldn't be fair. So there is no appealable issue, assuming Donald Trump is convicted, on the jury selection.
Chris, can I point out something else, too, that's unusual about today? Because as a person who practiced primarily in federal courts, I find New York State court voir dire, that's the questioning of the prospective jurors, fascinating because it's conducted by the lawyers. It reads like watching a focus group conducted by two different lawyers, where they're like, here are some themes that are important to me, or here's some issues I really care about. What do you think about that, juror number one? What do you think about that, juror number two?
You know that Lee Greenwood song, Proud to be American? How do you like that song? You like the Lee Greenwood song?
But for Todd Blanche, it was an opportunity to connect with them and to try and get from them, what is your opinion of Donald Trump, when they didn't want to give it? And to have to be friendly.
Very interesting. Lisa Rubin, Catherine Christian, great to have you. We'll have you back again soon. Back in 2020, during the George Floyd protests, a United States senator penned a controversial op-ed in the New York Times, calling for the U.S. military to be brought in to crush the protests in the streets, claiming those demonstrations were shot through with, quote, cadres of left-wing radicals like Antifa. That was, of course, Republican Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas. And that essay was hugely controversial, led to a revolt among staff at the Times, where leaders concluded it should not have been published. The top opinion editor ultimately resigned over the publishing of it. We would later find out from an editor who actually worked on Cotton's essay, a self-identified conservative editor, that he had to soften Cotton's first draft by deleting, quote, several objectionable sentences and adding that Cotton's desire for essentially mass violence on American streets by the state should not apply to, quote, peaceful protesters. The result was still pretty objectionable. Raised the question, how much worse is Tom Cotton when he doesn't have an editor trying to save him from himself? Turns out there is an answer. Because yesterday he posted this, quote, I encourage people who get stuck behind the pro-Hamas mobs blocking traffic, take matters into your own hands. It's time to put an end to this nonsense. That's a sitting U.S. senator. What he's calling pro-Hamas mobs are Americans, including from many Jewish groups, who are protesting and calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. According to most polls, that's not even a radical sentiment in America. A majority of Americans actually want a ceasefire. And Tom Cotton sure seems like he's calling for vigilante street violence against those people when they protest. Wildly reckless, despicable behavior out of an elected official. So a few minutes after publishing it, he edited the post to clarify that you should take matters into your own hands, quote, to get them out of the way. Much better, right? I got to say, even by the quite debased standards of our day, this is just crazy, explicit incitement to violence by a sitting U.S. senator. Also a good reminder of what happened back in 2020 when Senator Tom Cotton wanted to crush the protesters with military might. A Boston Globe investigation found that in the 16 months after George Floyd's death, drivers rammed their cars and trucks into protesters at least 139 times. They recorded 3 deaths and 100 injuries, including concussions and broken bones. Got to ask, is that what Tom Cotton means by taking matters into your own hands, running people over? Wait, there's another edit. Today, Cotton posted a demonstration of the violence he actually wants against peaceful protesters, saying that this is, quote, how it should be done.
Putain! J'ai dit gauche, j'habite à côté, bordel de merde! C'est quoi le gouvernement? Allez-y! Premier qui bouge l'encul! Premier qui bouge l'encul! Vas-y! Premier qui bouge l'encul!
Catch a little kick to the peaceful protester's face at the end. That's how Tom Cotton wants it done. Most of us, I think, have that inner voice, that internal editor, if you will, that reminds us to be decent and humane to each other, even in really frustrating, trying circumstances, sitting in traffic behind a protest. But for years now, a different, darker impulse has been pushed on Americans by people with no internal editor, people with no capacity and no use for empathy. And some of them are even United States senators.
Hey everyone, MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.